The sun was just beginning to rise over Maplewood Lane, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet suburban street. Birds chirped in the distance, and the faint scent of fresh dew lingered in the air. It was the kind of morning that made you feel like everything was right in the world. I stood by my small produce stand, arranging baskets of freshly picked tomatoes, cucumbers, and zucchinis. The stand was nothing fancy, just a simple wooden table with a handmade sign that read, "Fresh from my garden," but it was my pride and joy. For years, I had been growing vegetables in my backyard, and selling them to my neighbors had become a small but meaningful side hustle. It wasn't about the money. It was about the joy of sharing something I had nurtured with my own hands. But that peaceful morning was about to be shattered. I was just handing a bag of tomatoes to Mrs. Henderson, one of my regular customers, when I heard an unmistakable sound of heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I turned to see a woman marching toward me, her face twisted in a scowl. She was in her late 40s, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer sunglasses perched on her head, and a handbag that probably cost more than my entire garden. Her name was Linda, and she was the self-proclaimed queen of Maplewood Lane. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice cutting through the calm like a knife. "What do you think you're doing?" I forced a smile, trying to keep things civil. "Good morning, Linda. Just selling some fresh produce to my neighbors." Linda crossed her arms tightly, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Selling? You mean cluttering up the neighborhood with this eyesore?" She gestured dramatically at my stand, as if it were some kind of crime scene. "This is a residential area, not a flea market. Do you even have a permit for this?" I chuckled, trying to diffuse the tension. "A permit? Linda, I'm just selling a few vegetables from my garden. It's not like I'm running a supermarket." She gasped, her eyes widening in mock horror. "So you admit it. You're running an illegal business right here in our neighborhood." I knew it. Mrs. Henderson, who had been quietly observing the exchange, let out a soft laugh. "Oh, Linda, give it a rest. Jake's tomatoes are the best in town. Why don't you try one instead of making a fuss?" Linda's face turned beet red. "I would never buy vegetables from some amateur. Do you even know if your produce is safe? You could be poisoning people for all we know." I raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure no one's ever died from an organic cucumber, Linda." That was when she pulled out her phone. "I'm reporting this right now. This is unacceptable. Our neighborhood has standards." With an exaggerated flourish, she began dialing, her voice rising as she spoke into the phone. "Yes, hello? I need to report an illegal business operation. There's a man selling unsafe produce on Maplewood Lane. It's a health hazard and a disgrace to our community." I crossed my arms, shaking my head as Mrs. Henderson leaned in and whispered, "She once tried to report my bird feeder for being an eyesore. Don't let her get to you." By the time Linda hung up, she looked smug, as if she had just won a major victory. "Enjoy it while you can," she said with a smirk. "Because soon, your little peasant market is going to be shut down for good." And with that, she spun on her heel and stomped off, leaving me to wonder if this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. The next morning, I was setting up my stand when a city inspector showed up at my doorstep. He was a tall, serious-looking man with a clipboard in hand. "Sir, we received a complaint about an unauthorized business operation on this property," he said, his tone neutral. I let out a breath, shaking my head. "Let me guess, blonde woman, about this tall. Looks like she runs a cult for angry suburban moms." The inspector coughed, trying to hide a smirk. "We can't disclose complainants, but let's just say you're not the first person on this street to get a VY sit because of certain—" I led him to my stand, explaining that I was just selling excess produce from my backyard. No employees, no large-scale operation, just homegrown vegetables. He glanced over everything, took a few notes, and then nodded. "Looks fine to me," he said. "As long as you're not violating any zoning laws, you're good." I sighed in relief, but I should have known Linda wasn't going to give up that easily. Not even 20 minutes later, Linda appeared again, standing at the edge of my property with a triumphant gleam in her eye. "Well," she demanded, "did they shut you down?" The inspector turned to her, looking unimpressed. "Ma'am, this stand is not violating any ordinances. He's within his rights to sell homegrown produce." Linda's mouth dropped open. "That's ridiculous. He's running a business in a residential zone. You need to do something about this." The inspector sighed, clearly tired of her antics. Unless you can prove VY to legal EVY denke that he's in violation, there's nothing more to discuss. Linda sputtered, unable to believe she wasn't getting her way. I'll take this higher up. You'll see. The inspector gave me a tired nod before walking away, Leah VYing Linda fuming on the sidewalk. I smirked. Well, Linda, looks like you're going to have to live with my tacky farm stand a little while longer. She stormed off, but something about the way she left made me uneasy. This wasn't over. Over the next few days, Linda upped her campaign against me. Flyers appeared on doors, claiming my produce was dangerously unregulated. Rumors spread that I was using toxic pesticides. One morning, I even found a fake online re-VYEW from someone claiming they got sick from my tomatoes. But for every lie Linda spread, my neighbors doubled down in support. Mrs. Henderson bought twice as many vegetables as usual. Old Man Jenkins sat at my stand like a bouncer, glaring at Linda whenever she walked by. And then came the final straw when Linda took things way too far. She called in a false health hazard complaint to the health department. I woke up one morning to find a man in a suit waiting in my yard, clipboard in hand. We received a report that you may be selling unsanitary produce, he said. I groaned, rubbing my temples. Let me guess, blonde lady, talks like she owns the neighborhood? The man sighed. We've heard about her. He inspected my stand, took samples, and even checked my garden. In the end, he found no violations. Everything here is clean, properly stored, and safe, he said. Linda, who had been watching from her front porch, stomped over. That's impossible. He's selling rotten vegetables. The inspector shook his head. Everything here is fine. If you continue filing false reports, you could face consequences. Linda paled. False. But I was just concerned for public safety. The inspector ignored her, handing me a report that confirmed I was in the clear. Linda glared at me, her fists clenched. You haven't seen the last of me. I smirked. Oh, I'm counting on it. The next morning, I woke up to find my stand vandalized. Wooden planks were scattered across my yard, vegetables smashed, and my sign ripped in half. I pulled up the footage from my security camera and sure enough, there she was, Linda, creeping out of her house in the middle of the night, destroying my stand with a level of fury I hadn't seen before. I posted the VY Deo in the neighborhood group chat, and within minutes, the comments flooded in. Unbelievable. She's gone too far. This woman is insane. The police showed up at Linda's door, and I watched from my porch as they handed her a citation for vandalism. For the first time since this war started, Linda had actually lost. But the neighborhood wasn't done. Signs went up all over Maplewood Lane. Boycott Linda's boutique. Support local farmers. Linda's store, once bustling with customers, was now empty. Her suppliers pulled their contracts, and within weeks, her boutique was forced to close. Linda packed up and left Maplewood Lane, her reign of terror finally over. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, and my produce stand thrived like never before. A few months later, I was offered a permanent stall at the local farmers market, and my small backyard project turned into a full-fledged business. As I stood at my new stall, surrounded by happy customers and friendly vendors, I couldn't help but smile. Linda had tried to tear me. The neighborhood had come together, stronger than ever, and justice had been served. Sometimes, the biggest battles lead to the sweetest VY stories. With Linda gone, Maplewood Lane felt like a different place. The air was lighter, the neighbors friendlier, and the street seemed to hum with a newfound sense of community. My produce stand, once a small backyard operation, had grown into something much bigger. The support from my neighbors had not only saved my business, but had also given me the confidence to expand. I invested in a larger garden, bought better equipment, and even hired a couple of local teens to help with harvesting and setting up the stand. What had started as a hobby had turned into a thriving small business. But just as things were settling into a peaceful rhythm, a new challenge emerged. One morning, as I was setting up my stand, I noticed a MOVYing truck parked a few houses down. A young couple was unloading boxes, their laughter carrying down the street. They looked friendly enough, early 30s, dressed casually, and clearly excited about their new home. I waved as they passed by, and they waved back with warm smiles. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I called out. "Thanks," the woman replied. "I'm Emily, and this is my husband, Mark. We're so excited to be here." I introduced myself and offered them a basket of fresh vegetables as a housewarming gift. They seemed genuinely grateful, and for a moment, I felt a sense of hope. Maybe Maplewood Lane was finally moving past the drama Linda had brought. But as the days went by, I began to notice something odd. Emily and Mark kept to themselves, rarely interacting with the rest of the neighborhood. They didn't join in on the block parties or stop by my stand like the others. At first, I chalked it up to them being busy settling in, but then I started hearing whispers. "Did you see what they're doing to their yard?" Mrs. Henderson asked one morning as she picked out a few tomatoes. I shook my head. "No, what's going on?" "They've torn up the entire front lawn and replaced it with some kind of artificial turf. And they've got these huge, blinding floodlights that stay on all night. It's like they're trying to turn their house into a sports stadium." I frowned. That didn't sound like the friendly couple I had met. But I didn't think much of it until the complaints started rolling in. It started with Mrs. Jenkins, who lived next door to Emily and Mark. "They've got this dog that barks all night," she told me one afternoon. "I've tried talking to them, but they just brush me off. And those lights. I can't even sleep with them shining into my bedroom." Then came Mr. Thompson, who lived across the street. "They've got some kind of loud generator running at all hours. It's driving me crazy. I've called the city, but they say there's nothing they can do." Even Jenkins, who was usually the most laid-back guy on the block, was fed up. "They've got this massive fence going up around their property. It's like they're building a fortress. What are they trying to hide?" The neighborhood was buzzing with frustration, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. It was like Linda all over again, only this time. It wasn't just one person causing trouble. It was an entire household. One evening, as I was closing up my stand, I saw Emily and Mark walking down the street. They were deep in conversation, their faces serious. I decided to approach them, hoping to clear the air. "Hey, Emily, Mark," I called out. "How's it going?" They stopped, their expressions tightening. "Oh, hi, Jake," Emily said, her tone polite but distant. "I just wanted to check in," I said, trying to keep my tone friendly. "I've been hearing some concerns from the neighbors about the lights and the noise. Is everything okay?" Mark crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "We're just trying to make our home comfortable. If people have a problem with that, maybe they should mind their own business." I held up my hands in a placating gesture. "I get it. Moving into a new place can be stressful. But we're a pretty tight-knit community here. If there's anything we can do to help, just let us know." Emily's eyes narrowed. "We don't need any help. We're fine." And with that, they turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling uneasy. It was clear that Emily and Mark weren't interested in being part of the neighborhood. But what were they up to? The complaints continued to pile up, and the neighborhood was growing increasingly frustrated. One night, Jenkins came by my stand with a determined look on his face. "I've had enough," he said. "I'm going to find out what's really going on over there." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm going to do a little digging. Something's not right with those two, and I'm going to figure out what it is." I hesitated, not sure if getting involved was the best idea. But Jenkins was already walking away, his mind made up. The next morning, Jenkins showed up at my stand with a triumphant grin. "You're not going to believe this," he said, pulling out his phone. "I did some research, and it turns out Emily and Mark are running some kind of online business out of their house. They've got a whole warehouse set up in their garage, and they're shipping stuff out all hours of the night. That's why they've got the generator and the lights theory working around the clock." I frowned. That explains a lot. But why are they being so secretive about it? Jenkins shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe they're trying to avoid taxes or something. But one thing's for sure, theory, not just your average neighbors." The news spread quickly, and soon the entire neighborhood was buzzing with speculation. Mrs. Henderson called for a meeting at her house, and everyone showed up, eager to discuss what to do about Emily and Mark. "We can't just let them disrupt the whole street," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice firm. "We need to take action." "But what can we do?" Mr. Thompson asked. "We've already called the city, and they won't do anything." Jenkins leaned forward, a determined look on his face. "We need to confront them. All of us. Together. If they see that the whole neighborhood is against them, maybe they'll back down." There were murmurs of agreement, and I felt a sense of unease. Confrontation had never ended well in the past, but it seemed like the only option. The next evening, The entire neighborhood gathered in front of Emily and Mark's house. The floodlights were on, casting an eerie glow over the street. Emily and Mark stepped outside, their faces tense as they saw the crowd. "What's going on?" Mark demanded, his voice sharp. "Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. "We're here to talk about the noise, the lights, and the disruption you're causing. This is a quiet neighborhood, and we'd like to keep it that way." Emily crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "We're not doing anything wrong. We're just running a business. If you don't like it, that's your problem." Jenkins stepped forward, his voice rising. "Your business is keeping everyone up at night and ruining the peace of this neighborhood. You need to find a way to run it without disturbing the rest of us." Mark's face turned red with anger. "We're not going to change anything just because you don't like it. This is our property, and we'll do what we want." The tension was palpable, and I could feel the situation spiraling out of control. I stepped forward, trying to mediate. "Look, we're not trying to start a fight. We just want to find a solution that works for everyone. Maybe there's a way you can adjust your business hours or soundproof your garage." Emily glared at me. "We're not changing anything. If you don't like it, you can call the city. But good luck getting them to do anything." And with that, they turned and went back inside, slamming the door behind them. The neighborhood was left standing in the street, frustrated and unsure of what to do next. But as the days went by, something unexpected happened. The noise and lights began to taper off. Emily and Mark started keeping quieter hours, and the floodlights were turned off at night. It seemed that the confrontation had made an impact after all. A few weeks later, I saw Emily at the grocery store. She looked tired but less defensive than before. I approached her cautiously, not sure how she would react. "Hey, Emily," I said. "How's it going?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's been a rough few weeks. I guess we didn't realize how much we were disrupting the neighborhood. We've made some changes to our business, and we're trying to be better neighbors." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "That's great to hear. We're all just trying to live peacefully, you know." She gave me a small smile. "Yeah, I get that now. Thanks for being patient with us." Over time, Emily and Mark became more integrated into the neighborhood. They started attending block parties, and Emily even stopped by my stand to buy vegetables. The tension that had once filled Maplewood Lane was replaced with a sense of unity and understanding. As I stood at my stand one morning, watching the sun rise over the street, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The neighborhood had faced its challenges, but we had come out stronger on the other side. Linda's reign of terror was a distant memory, and Emily and Mark had learned to be part of the community. Maplewood Lane was finally at peace, and I knew that no matter what challenges came our way, we would face them together. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.